Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Liz Ndoye, and I am happy to welcome you to the final and fourth Art in Isolation class for the month of June. During June, we've been looking at, studying, and being inspired by the arts from ancient civilizations. Tonight, we are going to spend a little time exploring hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs for me are one of the most wonderful things that came out of ancient and traditional civilizations. Archaeologists and historians aren't sure how they evolved, except for the fact that if you look at art from before the time of hieroglyphs, cave paintings for example, you will see that the artists who are creating the paintings are trying to tell a story. And historians and archaeologists believe that hieroglyphs writing grew out of this attempt to tell stories and to keep track of what was going on and to educate and communicate with people within a community. We're first going to talk about Egyptian hieroglyphs, probably some of the most hieroglyphic work in the world. And then I want us to look at and visit Maya hieroglyphs, my personal favorite. Egyptian hieroglyphs were the formal writing system used in ancient Egypt. Hieroglyphs combined logographic, syllabic, and alphabetic elements with a total of some 1,000 distinct characters. As I mentioned earlier, it's believed that the hieroglyphic script evolved from probably Bronze Age pictographs that were used to tell stories and to relay information to a larger community. The first Egyptian sentence was probably written in the Second Dynasty in the 28th century BCE. So hieroglyphs have been around for a long time. You'll see when I show you the image of Egyptian hieroglyphs that many of the pictograms and the logographics were derived from nature. Egyptian hieroglyphic writers and artists looked at the nature around them and used those images to create symbols for either whole words, ideas, or for actual letters of an alphabet. We're now going to look at some of that imagery because it will help you later on in our lesson when we are going to create our own hieroglyphs. This is one of the many charts that you can find on the internet that show you a few of the meanings of the hieroglyphs that were present in ancient Egyptian writing. Now, these are hieroglyphs that actually represent letters of the alphabet, and in fact, you can have a great deal of fun by trying to figure out how to write your own name in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. So, as you can see, natural forms were the inspiration for the letters that the ancient Egyptians used in their writing. There are forms that are reminiscent of plants, definitely animal shapes, more plant forms, and the colors. The colors were very vibrant and also very natural. I invite you to look further on the internet to see all the different symbolic pictograms that the ancient Egyptians used. We're probably most familiar with hieroglyphs in the Egyptian tradition that were carved in clay or stone. And this image is probably what you think of immediately when you think Egyptian hieroglyph. Because this piece of hieroglyphic writing is so old, the colors have faded, but you can see the color really played a significant role in ancient Egyptian art. Even in this faded stone, the color is quite rich. The red is very deep. The golden yellow was probably extremely bright when it was first created. Now, this is a symbol I'm sure many of you have seen before. It's the Egyptian Ankh, the symbol for life. Again, lots of natural, animal, and plant forms. And you can see that sentences, ideas, concepts, stories are being told and shared. There is a certain flow to the imagery, just as we have in the printed page of a book today. I'd now like to take us to another civilization, and that's ancient Maya civilization. The Maya people lived in Central and South and North America. You can find Maya art and culture in Mexico, in Guatemala, in Belize. They are what we call a Mesoamerican culture, and they had one of the most advanced classic writing systems in the world. They built enormous pyramids like the ancient Egyptians, and language and communication was extremely important to them in their daily lives. It was a way for them to teach, again, to communicate and to convey messages and to support the culture and mythology of their society. They often carved their hieroglyphs in stone, the way the ancient Egyptians did. They also painted on wood, on animal skins, and the earliest inscriptions which have been found date to the 3rd century BCE in Guatemala. Maya writing was in continuous use throughout Mesoamerica until the Spanish conquest of the Maya in the 16th and 17th centuries. Just as you can go to Egypt today and go to the Valley of the Kings and see hieroglyphs right on the pyramids, you can travel to Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize and follow the Maya trail and see their ancient pyramids and stela on which they carved their hieroglyphs. So we're going to look at some Maya hieroglyphic imagery, and then I'm going to show you 3 different projects that you can do inspired by the ancient hieroglyphs, both Egyptian and Maya. Maya hieroglyphs, very similar to the Egyptian hieroglyphic images, are derived from nature, animal and plant forms. There are prevalent use of dots and a little bit of cross-hatching as well. And many of these images represent numbers as well as words and sounds. They're quite intricate and often carved very deeply into stone. They frequently represent images of kings telling the stories of adventures or rituals that the Maya kings have performed. This is an actual carved Stila stone. You can see how deeply the artisans and artists carved into the rock. The hieroglyphs actually protrude out from the rock. We're going to look at one or two more images, and then I'm going to show you the projects that you can work on this week on your own. Look at the extraordinary craftsmanship in this hieroglyphic carving. Very fine, thin details and lines. It's quite, to me, fabulously beautiful. So again, you can see that some kind of story or message is being conveyed. Images perhaps of a king, symbols of his bravery, and adventures that he's had in his life. Our final image, you can see again, look at this. I think that this is a jaguar face. Very representational work, but in the Maya style. You can see the profile of a face here, probably again of a king. The Maya temples celebrated the exploit of the kings and told the stories of how they conquered their rivals and their enemies. Another beautiful carving. And I hope these images of hieroglyphs have really been inspiring you, because now I'm going to demonstrate to you 3 different types of art that you could create after looking at hieroglyphs. This is an actual tourist hieroglyph, Maya hieroglyph, that I was lucky enough to get on my travels to Belize. It is the profile of a king. It dates from 730 CE. It is probably the king's son, Chak, and it tells the story of how he defeated a neighboring city and enslaved the people of that city. It is carved in stone and quite typical of the stela, the actual stela, ancient stela that you can see in Belize, Guatemala, and Mexico. We're going to use this carving for the first project that you can do. You may not, I'm guessing you probably do not have a Maya carving at home. This is a project you can do with other objects in your home, or you can go on a walk in your neighborhood and do this project as well. This project may remind you of something you did as a child. It's called rubbing, and the way we do rubbings is to put the paper on top of the object and then literally rub the surface and then see what emerges. As you can see, I'm going to do a little bit down here. It will be easier for me to rub the actual image of the carving that I was holding up. So you may not be able to see what I'm doing, but the paper is on top of the carving, and I am rubbing with an oil pastel stick on top. And you can do this with crayon if you don't have oil pastel. Rubbings make wonderful textural pieces. You can do multiple rubbings. You can cut them out and collage with them. And you can make your own hieroglyphic story. Another project that you can do to recreate what carving a hieroglyph might have been like is to use a material called Sculpey. Sculpey is a soft clay that you can buy in Michael's or Dick Blick or any arts and crafts store. You can find it online. Sculpey is fantastic because it comes in a huge variety of colors, and you can do authentic hieroglyph making because, if you recall, I mentioned that both the Maya and the Egyptians painted their hieroglyphs after they carved them. We don't, unfortunately, get to see much evidence of that today because the colors faded. So Sculpey comes in bricks, but it is quite soft. And I've unwrapped some Sculpey and I flattened it. Basically, all you have to do is press the Sculpey, or you can use a regular rolling pin that you'd use to make cookies or when you're baking, making pie crust or bread. So just a kitchen rolling pin would be great. And you can create a thin, flat piece. Then, again, dig around in your kitchen, find a fork, find some kind of pointy tool, and go ahead and carve. I love the fork because you can press it deeply into the soft modeling clay and make wonderful impressions. My Sculpey is getting a little dirty because I have the oil pastel on my fingers. I can probably wash it off. So this is really simulating what an ancient hieroglyph artist probably had to do with sharper chisels, of course, and carving deeply into the stone. Now, the fun thing about carving into the modeling clay is you can also then make your own rubbing, putting paper on top and rubbing with crayon or oil pastel. If you don't want to spend money on Sculpey, you can create your own Play-Doh with flour, water, and salt. There are many recipes online for Play-Doh or modeling paste or clay. Just Google and look it up, and I'm sure you can find it. For our final project, we are going to do something called Crayon Resist. I'm going to draw my hieroglyph first in oil pastel, and then I'm going to do something magical. I'm going to paint over my drawing with watercolor paint and create a brilliant, colorful image. One thing that I do in my own art practice, I create these dolls. They have their own civilization and culture, and I've made a language for them. I've created my own hieroglyphic system inspired by the Maya and Egyptian hieroglyphs that I've looked at over the years. My symbols are based on sewing because in my culture, sewing is the highest skill that the dolls can have. So in doll civilization, their language is based on what they value most. So, draw first with crayon or oil pastel. You want to have an oil-based drawing material. It's really important that you use oil-based. Don't use pencil. It will not work with this project. I am just making up shapes that have a hieroglyphic feel for me. I'm thinking color, in keeping with the tradition of Egyptian and Maya art and hieroglyphs. I want to keep it fairly simple, at least for the first image. And you can do that too. Experiment. I'm always one for experimentation. If the first picture isn't to your liking, do a second one. Just keep creating until you've made something that you like. That's the beauty of art. You cannot mess up. Just have fun exploring. You want to press fairly hard with your crayon or oil pastel. You want a thick layer, and it's in preparation of the final step in this project of using watercolors. Again, concentrate on using bright colors. Think about natural, animal, and plant organic shapes. So I've added a little bit off camera, and I'm going to keep working with the oil pastel for a little bit longer, and then we'll do the final step with the watercolors. If you don't have watercolor paints at home, you might have tempera or poster paint. If you thin them down with water, they'll be good for this project as well. So again, think simple shapes, think organic plant and animal shapes, and think patterns. Hieroglyphic shapes have to be fairly repetitive and simple because, remember, again, they were language. Just the way we repeat letters of our alphabet, the hieroglyphic writers and artists repeated their shapes to tell a story. To make words, to make pictures to stand for words, etc. All right, I think that's enough for now with the oil pastels. You get an idea of how to start this project. Remember, again, you want to keep the oil pastel work pretty thick and heavy for this project, and you're going to see why in a minute. One thing you don't want to do, though, is color everything in completely. You do want to leave some of the white paper showing. All right, once you've finished your drawing, you're satisfied with it, now the real magic will begin. Watercolors or watered down poster paint should work. You could even use tea, although I don't know if you'd have as bright a color selection. You could use food coloring if you have some at home. You could use fabric dye. With the watercolor paint, you literally paint right over your drawing. And I love doing this project with young kids because they gasp every time I demonstrate, because they can't quite believe but the drawing is still showing. How does that work? It works because you've used an oil-based drawing tool for starters. That's your base. Watercolor paint, poster paint is water-based. Water and oil don't mix. That's why it's called a resist technique. Anywhere you put the oily, waxy pastel or crayon, the watercolor paint will not cover it up, will not stick. And it makes a really beautiful effect. You can mix colors. Try and keep your colors bright in the tradition of the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Maya peoples. You can let the paint drip and flow. This part can be very free and fun. I'm not going to have time to finish this image tonight, but that's okay. The same may happen for you. You can let it dry and go back and rework everything that you've done. But I think I've given you enough. I hope I've given you enough to inspire you to do your own hieroglyphic work. Maybe you'll love it so much you'll create your own hieroglyphic alphabet and then make your own language. It's great fun. I really invite you to try this on your own at home. Just a quick recap. Rubbings. If you feel comfortable walking around in your neighborhood, look for things that have texture. The bark of a tree, maybe a broken chunk of concrete, maybe someone's fence has an interesting texture. Put the paper on top, rub over it with the crayon or oil pastel. Carving with either modeling clay like Sculpey or Play-Doh that you make from a recipe that you find online. All you need is flour, salt, and water. And finally, our resist technique, where you draw first with the oil pastel and paint directly over it with a water-based paint. I thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you've liked this lesson, I invite you to go for the other lessons hosted by the Hoboken Library. You can visit their website, hobokenlibrary.org, to see all the videos in the Art in Isolation series. Thank you again so much. Thank you to the Hoboken Library for allowing us to have our Art in Isolation classes. Have fun, good luck, and art on, everyone.